Last agenda item to return to. Executive Officers Report, item 4F, draft letter to the Department of Fish and Game regarding the striped bass regulations. Mr. Fiorini.
Joe, can we punch up that portion of the letter at the end that talks about the need to fund adaptive management, and we question where the funding source will be? Can we be so bold as to suggest that they endorse the idea of returning to a bass stamp and using the ongoing funding stream for monitoring and adaptive management purposes?
Lauren, do you want to come up and talk about the bass stamp issue? Or should we have Dave come to talk about it? Actually, I think we can, but I do want to make you aware of the feedback we've gotten when we've talked with the Department of Fish and Game about that.
They don't have enough money. It shouldn't be diverted from other purposes, and the salmon people should pay it, but they'd rather not suggest it.
Well, it wasn't exactly that, but
I'll keep going, though.
Yeah, I understand. Yes.
The bass fishermen purchasing a stamp as they have in the past. Currently,
get that closer to you, if you will, please. Thank you.
There is no stamp in effect, and there was, and so the first obstacle would be a legislative decision to reinstate some type of a stamp, whether it's
I thought the Fish and Game Commission, doesn't the Fish and Game Commission retain authority to reinstitute the previously, I could be wrong on that.
I'm not sure. I would have to
as opposed to seeking a new statutory authorization.
I would have to check into that.
Okay.
I don't have that answer, Chairman. And I can get that for you if you want to pursue it. But the stamp, the inception of the stamp was to enhance striped bass fishing and sport fishing for fishermen. And the notion that they might then have to pay fees to support studies that are intended to cause a decline in the species seems a little tough to handle.
It's very easy to justify because the take limit has increased.
I'm going to suggest that we actually just add a clause in that next to last paragraph where it says to this end we recommend the Commission identify funding, and then say, and we suggest that you consider a bass stamp in advance of approving the revised regulations to ensure that they have sufficient. And I want to tinker with the wording a bit, but that's essentially where I want to put something in that they consider that.
I don't oppose that suggestion. My suggestion is you also think about what other funding can be allocated. I mean, the notion is, and this is an important discussion not so much for this illustration, but because it starts to deal with those collection of activities under the nomenclature of stressors. And the presumption that we've had all along, and the Delta Plan incorporates, that those who benefit and those who stress the Delta should have some role in providing solutions, including funding. So the striper stamp is simultaneously a beneficiary and an arguable stressor. But I'd give them two or three different ideas rather than simply one. Not all of them will be objected to by someone.
Well, and there used to be a Delta stamp, which could conceivably be used.
Yeah. And again, I'm interested in, I just have this faint recollection that the Fish and Game Board retained authority to reinstitute previous stamps. I could be wrong.
I will check into that and report
because
back.
That would be important if it were true.
In the meantime, we will need to finalize this letter with an addition about funding, and we're asking for approval from you or support from the council to do that, because it does need to be in by, I think, the 2nd of February for the Fish and Game Commission meeting.
So are you seeking a motion in support of
I am.
sending this letter with the discussed addition or change?
Yes.
I so move.
Okay. Is there a second? Second, Mr. Johnston.
Can I make a comment first?
Yes, sir.
It seems to me that we could have the law of unintended consequences here. And it also, I think it's referred to in the letter, but not really given as much detail and depth. Maybe we should suggest certain measurements that be done.
We actually, this letter references a study letter received by the Independent Science Board. I don't remember precisely what. I think it was Peter Lund and a couple of other scientists had, when the legislators, senators and assemblymen, about 24 or 36 of them wrote us, said we were supposed to take on this issue of striped bass and asked us to support legislation. We had, I guess, solicited an opinion letter, and all of the hesitations and reservations about the effectiveness of this approach were highlighted there. I mean, is the word displacement? You get rid of one fish species or reduce it substantially. Guess what? Other fish move in and start eating the things. So there are a host of questions, including the need to determine in advance the standards you use to judge success or failure. And I have a recollection that we had sent a letter, or maybe we forwarded the Science Board comments or your comment, I don't remember, to the Fish and Game Commission before on exactly that point, including the letter. Do you remember?
No, I
can talk about that letter.
can, as I understand it, and I'm just gathering facts in the last couple of days since this became topical. NOAA Fisheries and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, working with the department, have approved a plan for monitoring the effects of this regulatory action.
I think that's right.
The majority of the funding needed to accomplish that is present. They don't have funds for some of the food habits work and one other small component of the study. But it's not a major obstacle that would prevent collecting information about the effectiveness of the regulation. The real question here, I think, goes to the heart of what is meant when you say an adaptive management science approach. The comment letter that you have prepared here talks about the relationship of other predators, both native and non-native, within the delta. We don't understand that now. We don't know what a reduction of any one of those species does as far as affecting those other predator species. The letter further goes on to talk about what and how the prey are affected by this. We're just, if you think about it from the science perspective, what's being proposed in that letter is such a huge undertaking that I don't think it could be resolved in the next 20 years or 10 years, most certainly.
Well, and this may be just a collision of popular political and public demands to do something, and therefore here's the target of opportunity, go get it. But one of the instructions to us on using science and best available science is to at least try to haul back a study, an effort, a plan, an action to judge it against science, even if it's damn hard, or the answer is we don't know and probably won't know for a reasonable time. Those were the issues that Lund and the other scientists had raised in their letter. They're worth considering. But it's pretty clear they're going to go ahead with this. And so the question is, do we try to suggest a scientific process for them, even if it is hard? I think so.
Yes, I mean, to me, this is an example of what you as a council are tasked with doing under the statute is for best available science and adaptive management. This is an ecosystem restoration action that will be taken, and it's an experiment. I don't know if it's a bold experiment, but it is an experiment. There is not enough known about this to say this will be successful. We don't know that taking this action will be successful in achieving its intended outcome. There's too much scientific uncertainty here. So as far as the scientists are concerned, unless you pair taking this action with a well-designed monitoring, assessment, and reporting program, we don't see it even worth taking the action if you're not going to follow through with that. We definitely need this information to reduce that uncertainty and to learn from it so that we'll know what better actions to take. I could see gaining a lot of information from moving forward on this experiment.
From a non-scientific standpoint, it makes sense if you want to reduce the population to allow more mature fish to be taken. When you start going with the juvenile fish, adaptive management is something when you know more information, then you change a little bit what you're doing. I mean, we use that in business and everything else. It would seem to me that you want to make a change that will have an impact fairly soon. If you are only taking increasing numbers of mature fish and not affecting the juvenile population, and you figure out, okay, right now we have X, we want to go to X minus Y. I presume you're going to set a target. If you're only talking about mature fish, then you can stop or you can reduce the limit again without taking a long time to see what the effect would be because you're not affecting the young fish. It would seem to me that would be a place to start. But at the very least, you've got to have some measurements, and you've got to measure the population of the striped bass.
Right,
and you could also measure the population of the prey of the striped bass and see if, by reducing the number of striped bass, we're increasing the number of prey. But, I mean, you've got to do those two things.
Right. Well, that's why we're interested in the science program hasn't had the opportunity to see this adaptive management, monitoring and adaptive management plan that is required as part of the settlement. So it's for exactly those reasons that you've just outlined. Mm-hmm. We recommend that they outline their conceptual model basically of why taking this action will achieve the outcome and what things they will monitor to assess how effective it's been.
I think that's well within the purview of this group to at least make those recommendations. I think we should.
Yep. All right. So Mr. Fiorini's motion is to approve the staff draft letter with the addition of various optional finance tools that the Fish and Game Commission should consider, which will include but not be limited to the notion of reinstitution or reauthorization, or whatever it's called, of a bass, striped bass stamp, whatever it is, and comparable ideas that Mr. Grindstaff is going to evaluate.
A drag out of my staff.
Drag out from staff, okay, to say it precisely.
But does that address what we've just been talking about?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Yeah, you know what I think this is all about? Our role is to take these legal settlements and political dispute resolutions and deals and trying to civilize them a little bit by saying at least be scientific about what it is, so 3 years later we can have scientists who they're not advocates of a position other, say, it worked really effectively and you ought to consider it for other things, or it didn't work, or what they'll probably tell us is, hell, we don't know. The evidence isn't clear.
Well, isn't that something we should try to have an effect on?
Yes.
I mean, one would think that if they're going to lower the population, they should have some sort of population target.
One would think that.
And that when they reach that target, look at the effects of that.
And it may well be that these standards are exactly that. I have not examined them in detail, but if they aren't, they should be. I like that a lot.
I think the letter is intended to say
that.
They need to have that, and we do say we recommend they use the adaptive management approach that's required in the Delta Reform Act. So I think
my experience has
that's
been
pretty vague, isn't it?
Well,
yeah.
I mean, it's my opinion, but I think we've covered in the letter right now all of your concerns. But
Look, this is a
If you have-
we're going to, if it's done right, they'll set a
Yeah.
performance measure for themselves. I predict with a very high level of certainty that all the interest groups will demand that it either be higher, lower, or abolished for all the typical reasons. But at least for scientific-based organizations like the Department of Fish and Game and their ancillary governing body, the commission in certain ways, hell, it's a responsible thing to do. No miracles promised.
And with all due respect, we try to be as explicit and as clear as we possibly can. And I can't read in here where we've covered all those concerns that we've just expressed.
We can edit it.
I think what may be missing is this is the result of a lawsuit settlement. And the guidelines that were set forth in that settlement were pretty clear about what needs to be done. We remain, we don't address those issues because I think the science community feels that they've been addressed in the settlement. My concern is $1 million was set aside to fund whatever would come about of this program, and I don't think that's enough. The way money evaporates in this ecological restoration arena, that's not going to get the job done. And so I just want to make sure that we go on record as saying there needs to be a source of secure, ongoing funding to make sure that we take this out long enough to get the result, to monitor and understand whether or not this action is having a benefit or not.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I'd probably go one step further and talk about some of the things that should be monitored. And if we can do that by incorporating by reference to a letter where all of that is outlined, I think that would be fine with me. But I don't think we should just bless this thing without putting in some specifics.
In a perfect world in the future, maybe in some of these lawsuits where the parties are together, somebody remembers there's an independent science board and you turn to them and say, we're going to settle it, we've got $1 million, let's see what they recommend on what a test would be. Too late for this one. But
Not
that's
too late to put something in our letter to try.
not in the
to-
letter.
to
Not
give
in the
them
letter. But we
some-
can't change the court
So,
settlement.
Understand.
Yeah.
So what I'm
Understand. All I'm
hearing-
talking about is the letter here.
What I'm hearing,
Oh, I'm sorry, Tom.
see if I have this right, is you would like for us to be more specific, probably in the paragraph it says first talks about adaptive management and saying that should include specific targets for populations.
For example,
Okay.
i.e., and give some
So
specifics.
we can do, that's a relatively.
Then I'd be sad. Then I'd shut up.
Okay.
Relatively easy.
For now.
Okay.
Okay, Don.
Is the lawsuit such that we couldn't suggest in the letter that the Independent Science Board be the body that would be the ones that at least would be the check-in point for the adaptive management program?
I think the settlement stipulated to the Department of Fish and Game is my recollection.
Review it.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering, again, you talk about collaboration, we talk about folks working together. Certainly it's been pointed out, obviously, maybe some of the challenges, but maybe one of the ways to build upon this and certainly to gain further understanding and hopefully build some trust in processes, and nothing to do with fish and game, but is that engaged independent science board. I mean, in us asking for that. Again, obviously, maybe some funding questions about that and so forth, but I think that could benefit in the long run and may help to shortcut at least some of the concerns, because you have a panel of folks who are focused, in large part on the Delta. They have an understanding. They're looking at stressors and so forth. And this is, again, we talk about a pilot or experiment or whatever you want to call it. It would seem to me that would, again, coming back to the Delta and our responsibility. Again, if there's any reason for not suggesting that. And the other thing I would ask is that, just as a part of a second part of the question, is that beyond that, then we're being asked here to put together and to bless a letter that goes. I think that communication, if this goes through the process and this is instituted, and it's going to be a matter of probably a few years, I guess, at a minimum, but that there ought to be, requested here that there be some touch points back before the council and its staff. I mean, we say we look forward to working with the commission on better understanding, reducing. I think, again, it goes back to what we've been talking about all day today, is performance measures and so forth. One of the measures ought to be that at least you come back in this forum where you get It's not obscure. It's, anybody can tune in and see. At some juncture, maybe it's 3 or 5 years out, whenever that is, but there's some touchback points from a public perspective, because then you get understanding. Then you get to the interest groups, those that have gone to court, as well as anybody else who's interested in this setting where the council is, acting in their respective role. So I guess I would suggest that might be part of this too, is to ask then, and whether it's a report back or based upon review, that there be some ongoing status reports. We're building that dialogue now, so that's.
So you would ask.
Mr. Fiorini would agree to accept that suggestion in his motion. Is that correct? I don't think I asked if anyone seconded the motion. Oh, Pat. Pat, is that okay with you? Okay. The motion is now amended to reflect that. Are we through on questions? Before I take a vote, I'm going to open it for comments from the audience, if any. I don't think we have any blue forms submitted on this. Does anyone wish to talk to us on this? I see no one. Okay. We've got the motion. Any discussion? Okay. Starting with Mr. Nordhoff.
Nordhoff, aye.
Marcus, aye.
Eisenberg, aye.
Totally aye.
Okay, you've got a 6-0 vote on as amended. And Joe, if you would, when you do send it out, ship copies. I know it'll be posted on the website.
Ship copies to everybody and post
Yes, and certainly send copies to the members. Okay,
Yes.
Members, any other items to come before us? Mr. Grindstaff, any other items?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, next meeting, 2 days. The following meeting, 2 days. The following meeting, 2 days. We're into 4 days a month from February, March, April, and Mr. Grindstaff says he's even noticed it May to go through the remainder of this.
And we will be sending reminder emails of the schedule for the year, along with a monthly update to remind everyone of
Right.
what the meeting schedule is for each month,
Or if there's any change, amend that.
or if there's any
Or
change.
if there's any change. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The meeting is adjourned.